Spark L&D Podcast. I'm Inna Olimskaya, and this series is for L&D professionals who want to grow their impact, and also for business leaders, how L&D can drive performance. Each episode shares practical tools and insights that will help you, the L&D professional, to spark L&D with confidence. And in today's episode, we will deep dive into a topic that is quite often seen as technical. We will explore why this skill is essential for L&D professional, especially for those who want to grow their strategic impact. And also we will see how it links with business outcomes. And I will be helped by today's guest, Anja, who will support us in this discovery. So Anja, welcome. I'm very happy to see you here. So Anja brings actually 25 years experience in corporate, but also in external L&D consultancy. And she has background in business, but also in adult education. And I had the pleasure to work with Anja on different learning projects and saw how she designs workshops and learning solutions that really gives learners what they need in this particular moment, but also the learning that is tied with business goals. Anja, very happy to see you here today.
Thanks for having me.
And this is actually my first question. Quite often instructional design is seen as a technical skill, and there is opinion that when you grow as L&D, you do it less or you even don't need to focus on it. So why you still think that instructional design is a leadership skill in L&D?
You mentioned, is it a technical thing or is it a leadership thing? If we're doing instructional design, and I think it's both. Plus it's also a creative thing for me, at least. That's why I still, after many years, really enjoy designing learning journeys, because I can look at a new situation in a new company or with a new team, and together we can define what is the objective, and then we can draw the path how we can get there, right? So, and in that sense, I think it's a leadership task or responsibility, because that objective needs to be defined very clearly, both from a people perspective, but also, of course, from a business perspective. Yeah. It should also always have a technical component, because I feel that, of course, with experience, you're not necessarily following the steps of ADDIE or other frameworks step by step. You might be jumping around, but it's always important to tick all the boxes. And it makes sense to have a framework in mind, or to have a process for yourself that you can check to make sure that you've got all those boxes ticked. And ultimately, I think it's a very creative endeavor as well. Because, it should be fun for the participants. We're working with adults. We're not in school anymore, where we can tell them, well, you need to do calculus 101 this year, and they're forced to do it. So we need to also engage them and make it motivating and interesting for them to want to reach that objective. Because our adult learners, they're not going to do anything, or they're not going to do and learn and practice and try out new things that we want them to try out if they don't see that it's beneficial for them, and if there's no fun involved in the process, at least in my experience. And I like to have fun with my teams.
Yeah, I know about that. Well, thank you for sharing your perspective. So it sounds like instructional design is a kind of a leadership skill, because it's a frame, but that is done and executed with intention. And when you have this clear intention uh, before you start designing, then you kind of help in the team, but also ultimately the organization to achieve a certain goal. That's good. Good. How do you think, what role does instructional design play when we need to align learning and business strategy? It's sometimes it looks like two different worlds. This is learning strategy and learning. This is business goals and something in between. How instructional design helps to build this bridge?
But I think what often happens in companies is that business strategy is being defined, and then we identify what might not be working with our people right now or what they don't know yet in order to do a particular thing. And L&D is being tasked to close that gap. So L&D is often used as sort of the executing organ
Mm-hmm.
to fill those gaps that we've identified in the skills of our people. I think even stronger a role L&D can play and should play in looking ahead, yeah, in being part of that conversation around where does the business want to go, so that not only the numbers are fixed of how much revenue do we do in which segment of our business, but that early on in the process, L&D is involved in trying to identify, well, if this is the road that the business wants to take, then how do we need to make sure that we're preparing our people for that over a longer time horizon?
Mm-hmm. I
So that it's not only addressing problems that we
Mhm.
currently have or trying to optimize our current setup, but that's also proactively looking in the future of where's our industry going, where does our organization sit within that, and what are the types of people we need, what are the skill sets, the capabilities they need in order to support that transition into the future of the business.
So it sounds like instructional design has even broader meaning. It's not just about building one workshop or one training program. It's also ability to understand where the business is right now and where we want to be in the future. And then L&D professional through competencies, knowledge, and skills in structural design can build the journey that will help eventually to achieve that bright future.
I think I would say instructional design is the thing I do in order to
Mm.
get to that objective. But what that business objective is, whether it's thinking ahead into the future and preparing the team, or looking at issues we currently have and solving those problems, that's more of, you said, L&D strategy, right? That's an L&D strategy question. And
Okay.
that L&D strategy should ideally be very closely linked to business strategy, but not only after the strategy has already been decided on.
Yeah. So to involve, it's crucial to involve L&D on the early stages
Early on in the
where the
process.
overall strategy in the organization is being defined, and then L&D can already partner and provide some perspectives of how the development can happen.
I think also because L&D has usually, at least in my experience, the advantage of being very much in touch with what's happening in the field, on the
Mm.
ground, with the frontline workers. So I work a lot with sales teams, um, and those conversations with reps give you a lot of insight into where the market is shifting, what is working, what is not working, why the organization might have to transition into a particular way. And I think that's very important information that should also travel a little bit upwards in the organization to feed into those important strategy decisions. So that it's not only top down, but L&D is sort of traversing the whole spectrum from speaking with the worker on the ground to also speaking with the management team, and can be a good communication channel to transfer that information from one side to the other, but in both directions.
So that means that instructional design helps us to connect strategy with learning experience, but it's not
Yeah.
enough. You also need to have you need also to partner with the business and be really like learning partner, understanding the overall strategy in the organization. Then, in order to provide the proper design
Yeah,
of these
exactly.
learning
Yeah.
solutions. You mentioned a bit that you worked with different frames, or you said that when you are quite experienced, you're forgetting about the frames. But for those who just want to deep dive into instructional design and want to boost that skill, can you share a bit about the frameworks that you're using, or how you think when you start learning?
Mm. Oh, we sure can. Is it okay if I share my screen?
Let's try. Yes, of course. I hope
Let's
it
see.
will work.
Okay, so I think for those just getting started in L&D, one of the classic ones that you learn about is ADDIE. So let's just put that up because I'm a
Mm.
very visual learner. I always need to see something to remember it. So ADDIE is first you analyze what the need is, then you design your program in order to address that need. You develop the actual materials, you implement your program or training, and at the end you evaluate it.
Mm.
Which I think is very useful and gives you sort of the big building blocks of that you need to go through from A to Z. Personally, I find that the analysis part is the breaking point. You need to really understand the situation very well. So I use something in my mind that's more like a score and not an ADDIE. Yeah, so because typically, if I work with a new client, spend quite a lot of time really understanding the situation before I start designing a program. So I would ask a lot of situation questions. Yeah? Tell me what's going on. What have you identified? Why did you come to me? Then I would ask deeper and say, okay, what's the cause? Yeah? How did you end up in that situation?
Mm.
Because there might be a lot of information that is super valuable for me to design the right solution. Say if the request is, well, we need a refresher sales training for our sales teams. And I'm asking, okay, what's the cause? Why do you need this training right now? If I get the answer, well, I've got a team of 10 people, but actually 8 of them are new and 2 of them are super experienced and old, that will require a very different training from we're a startup, we're just starting new, everybody just got hired,
Mhm.
from, you know what, everybody's been in the organization for 20 years and they're doing business as usual. We need to sharpen them up a little bit more. Yeah, so those scenarios are very different and they will require very different training designs.
And sometimes even on this phase, you can find out that probably training is not the first solution that
And
should
it
be
might not be
applied
the
in the
right solution at all. You're
organization.
right. Yeah. So after I'm asking, okay, what's the cause? Then I would say, based on what we've learned about what's the situation and what's the history, now what's the outcome we want to achieve? Yeah. So if we're going back to the example, in the case of the very experienced team that have kind of, lost their fire, the outcome would be maybe to increase the motivation, but also
Mhm.
increase their willingness to challenge what they've done. And not so much practicing technical skills and them being able to ask 10 different kinds of questions. Because they can do that, they might not do it for other reasons than not knowing. Yeah? So we need to have a clearly defined outcome. Oops. Once I know this, then I'm looking at, okay, what are all the resources that my learners need in order to do that? And that might be learning activities. And there's a whole bunch. Of course, it could be a workshop, face-to-face training, online. It might be materials they need. Then we have here, it might be materials.
And then you are
So
trying
maybe,
to find what is the best resource for this particular objective. Yeah.
or usually a combination,
Mhm.
right? And I think it's also important to look at the systemic aspects. Yeah, in resources, I might be creating a series of different learning activities and materials that go along with it. So they might have a pre-read, then we might have a little online workshop. They might get some tools for peer-to-peer work. But also, do we have systems in place? So in sales, it's often CRM systems, incentive systems also, different organizational systems that will impact how they actually act in their day-to-day life. So is all of this in alignment? If there's any conflicts, then we can't reach our outcomes. And then, of course, after we've created that little learning journey, we need to look at how can we evaluate if we actually arrived at our objective. And I've mentioned a couple of times the word learning journey now, because for
Yeah.
me,
How
learning
does
is a
it
little
look, this
bit,
learning journey?
it's a little bit like this. Yeah, so here's my mountainscape, and my outcome, oops, is the flag that I'm putting up here that says, okay, this is where we all want to end up. My sales team or my marketing team, they should all end up on the top of that particular mountain. And then I've got a few of them that are down here. But I might also have somebody who's already up here. Yeah, so that was the example with the cause. Yeah, what is
Mm-hmm.
the specific situation? And I might even have somebody who's over here on a completely different mountain,
Resting till waiting.
chasing other goals. Yeah, so if I'm just creating a plan, assuming that everybody's down here and my journey is very linear, going up here, oops, oh, my pen is not my friend today, then I'm going to completely lose that person.
Oh.
So, as part of my plan, if I know that I've got this person sitting here potentially on another mountain, I need to include a way to first have him join his team over here again. And if I know I have a couple of my learners that are already halfway up the mountain, while the other are still at the bottom, then what other activities can I potentially plan for these guys so that they're kept busy while their team is joining them up here? Can I utilize the experience of how they got up to that particular piece of the mountain already, and make them maybe co-facilitate a particular session?
That's an interesting approach. And I like your IDE frame. I actually also use it. And I realized that this frame helps not only design workshops, e-learning courses, but even to build the whole capability programs that
Mhm.
are focusing on various elements, not only competencies development, boosting skills and knowledge, but also other processes and key elements within the organization. So I really recommend everyone who doesn't know where to start, deep dive into idea frame. It's really so simple, but also helps you to navigate in this complexity while you are designing.
Exactly. And there's also a lot of resources around Addy because it's been used since a long, long time.
So let's come back to the main room. We have one more
Let me
question for
stop
you,
this.
Anja. So when you started working on a structural design, or you saw how other L&D professionals work on it, what
Mhm.
kind of mistakes did you notice they made, or maybe something
Maybe I made.
that didn't go well in some of your instructional design, and what you learned from that experience? Can you share a bit about that?
Oh, I sure can. Um, yeah, mistakes I've made a lot, as I think everybody does every day. That's part of, living and trying new things. Um, I think when I drew my little mountain and, noticing that sometimes people are on different mountains, is one of my key learnings from mistakes I've made in the past. Because when I started out, I thought, okay, everybody's down here, and this is where we need to go. And then there's this one clear path. If I properly structure all my content and all my skills, and I'm properly building it on top of each other, then we'll all end up there. And that's just not, in my experience, how it usually works out. Because people rarely are all in the same starting spot. They don't come in with the same motivation.
Mm,
So, identifying and knowing as much as I can beforehand about the different participants, for me at least, has proven very helpful in overcoming that trap of creating like this one perfect path. And then out of 10 people, maybe one ends up there.
yeah.
I think another critical one is to not try to do too many things in too short a time.
Mhm.
So, I tend to be very optimistic, and I think we've worked together, you know that, in what I think we can achieve. Um, but then on the flip side, I'd rather have, more content to share than too little. If we have a 2-day workshop, I'd rather come with a couple more useful tools in my bag. But as I've become more experienced, I've learned to be more comfortable with cutting things out.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not trying, because it usually doesn't work if you've got half a day left, but you still have like 5 things you want to do, and then you're trying to rush through all of them. You end up not achieving any of it. So I'd rather give more time to the process between
Mm-hmm.
the learners and each other and the materials and the dynamic in the group, um, at the expense of giving more input.
Mm-hmm.
Because more input usually gets forgotten fairly quickly. Um, Giving the time for people really to engage with the topic and each other, thinking it through, talking it through, identifying what different perspectives they might have, what different experiences they might have made in the past with certain things. That's usually what sticks with them longer.
Yeah, thank you for
I don't
sharing.
know. How about you?
I actually can
You've
relate to that because I started recalling my first training programs, and they also had a lot of theoretical content and a lot of exercises. But then with time, I actually also prefer to do less but deeper,
Yeah,
and really create a situation. If we are talking about the workshop or the learning journey, where participant can try and experiment, but also where I always try to book additional time for reflection. Because
mhm,
if you give a theory and then you practice, but there is no debriefing and a discussion about the insights after trying something new, then yeah, that's not the full cycle of the learning. So it's very crucial to have enough space for going
time for
deeper.
debriefing. Absolutely. I agree. And I also find that, if we manage to instill the motivation and the interest in our learner to actually engage with the topic, whether it's, how do I ask better questions, or how do I listen better, or how can I coach my employee better,
Mm-hmm.
even if they don't get all the information from me today that I could give them, but if they start implementing and using some things, then they realize, I would need a little bit more here around this topic.
Mm-hmm.
Either they can find the information, or what I sometimes do, I'll just have additional information ready so that they have a little take home package. Because the key thing for me is that they start implementing, start putting into practice, and then they've got a resource that they can go back to learn more about, the theory and the
Mm-hmm.
technicalities when they're ready.
Yeah, I see. How do you balance a learning experience with business expectations when you do design the workshop or the whole learning journey?
It's a difficult question because as L&D, of course, we're business partner to the business, right? And the business wants us to execute on what the objective is and what they need to achieve. And as a learning person, I know
Mm-hmm.
that if I'm running over the needs of my participant because I try to, give them more input or give them more information that they're supposed to be using out there in the field tomorrow, but I'm not listening to what their need is, even if I give it to them, they're never going to end up there. So if I have to make a choice between pushing another message and listening to my participant, personally, I will always listen to my participant. Because if they don't feel seen, if they don't feel heard, nothing's going to happen. Yeah, no change, no growth, no development, no motivation, no energy is going to translate into their work. And communicating that to business sometimes is difficult. But I find that as L&D professionals, especially if you're more seasoned, if you've done that a couple of years, it's very important to stand your ground also,
Mm-hmm.
and to tell the stakeholders in the business that ask you to do certain things why it does not make sense. Because I'm sure you've had that. I've had that a number of times that I've been asked to do something in a particular way. And I just know it's not going to work because I know about the dynamic of groups in a workshop room or in online trainings. And I can sure try if you want me to. You can force me if you're my boss. But it's going to be wasted time for all involved. So I would want to encourage younger L&D managers to stand their ground, to to trust their expertise, to trust their knowledge, and to clearly communicate upwards what is possible and why it needs to be done in a particular way and why some things are not possible and don't make sense.
So, if I sum up, to find this balance, what helps you to find that balance is to put really learner in the center of this learning design or like
Yeah,
learning program, and then through focusing on their needs and their experience, eventually we can achieve also the
objective.
business goals.
Yeah.
Okay, Anja, before we wrap up, last question. What would you recommend to do for someone who really wants to grow their instructional design skill? Maybe you can recommend any resources that our listeners can check after this podcast. So, any recommendations from your side?
Oh, that's a tough one. You know, that's especially difficult, and I think maybe you feel similar, or you can share what resources you have. But once you've done something for a very long time, it's actually difficult to pinpoint the resources that were the most useful. But I think researching frameworks like ADDIE, for example, is a good starting point because it gives you a good structure that you can follow. Um, what else? I would try to learn from every group experience I'm part of, right? So whether I'm attending a meeting or a workshop as a participant or a trainer, I think you can learn so much by just being very observant of the actions and reactions of the people in a group. So even if I'm just looking at a regular business meeting, there's always somebody who's leading it, how are they leading it, and what's working and what's not working. And constantly reflecting on those types of interactions, I find is super beneficial because ultimately, whether it's a workshop or a business meeting, it's always people interacting with each other. And the more I can learn and know about how people engage with each other and what reactions I can usually expect if a particular input comes in, the more efficient my training will become as well, because I can anticipate the reactions of my participants based on what I'm putting in.
And then implement that anticipation into your design of the program.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, Anya, thank you so much for sharing your tips and also recommendations. If I sum up what we discussed today, for those who really want to grow their instructional design competencies and deep dive into these skills, it's important to start with understanding the business objective, what problem we are trying to solve, and how this learning experience will contribute to solving this particular situation. Then, second, use a very simple frameworks like those that Anya shared with us today. And also, I would add one more: do early testing. So, ask feedback from learners. Who are even not join their learning experience, but will join in the future, and also your stakeholders. Because if you do very early testing, you can still make some adjustments and prepare for the proper launch. So very simple takeaways. And then for our listeners, so if this podcast and this episode really triggered some thoughts and you started thinking about the role that instructional design can play in your also professional development, take time to reflect and think about one question: what would you do differently when you design and when you work on your next learning project to make it more strategic? and share your answers in the comments under this video. And if you found out this episode useful, feel free to share with your professional friends and also with someone who is passionate about L&D on the same way as we are. So follow Spark L&D, stay updated on new episodes, and join conversations. Thank you for watching, listening, and we see you in 2 weeks. And thank you, Anja.